All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us again here for another edition of our Franchise Your Business webinar series. My name is Tom DuFore, and I am the CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team. And as we launch into our current franchise sales and marketing trends session, just want to say while people are loading in, if you have not done so already, please make sure you subscribe to our two podcasts. The first is Multiply Your Success. We have a great episode this week and one coming out next week. Next week is episode 164. Weeks in a row, we've had an episode be released. And then the other one is called Franchise Your Business. Both are available on your favorite podcast service, and you can get access. We publish on that podcast if you'd like to share this recording with someone else or come back and listen to a webinar that maybe you missed. We have the audio on that available. So just wanted to give a couple housekeeping items before we jump into that, into our session today. If you're new to us for our current franchise sales and marketing trends, how this works is we take and go through some macroeconomic data. And so we start out wide and from a macro view, and we start narrowing down all the way down to small business and then into the franchise sector, going over some key numbers and variables and factors that we think are relevant and things that you should be aware of for franchise sales and franchise marketing. And the key to this is minimum being aware of it and just knowing that your franchise candidates may have this on their mind. And then on the other side of this, talking about this with your candidates so that you're telling them exactly what to expect. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can go right into getting this program moving. So the first chart that I always like to share and go through is from the Institute for Supply Management. And by the way, I do move quick through this, so feel free to raise your hand, ask questions if or type into the chat box there, and I will go ahead and answer those as this is a live session. This is the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index report. And it reads here, the U.S. manufacturing sector contracted in June as the manufacturing PMI registered 46%, 0.9 percentage point lower than the reading of 46.9% recorded in May. This is the 8th month of contraction and continuation of a downward trend that began in June of 2022. So you can see here, it's if you're looking at this starting really in early 2021, there's just been this steady downward fall for manufacturing purchasing managers index. And so I just like to show that this is tends to be a leading indicator, and this is in a negative territory. The next one we want to take a look at is the services purchasers managers index report. So this is from the Institute for Supply Management again. And you can see here, it says in June, the services PMI registered at 53.9%, a 3.6 percentage point increase compared to the May reading of 50.3%. Therefore, the June services PMI indicates the overall economy is growing for the 6th consecutive month after 1 month of contraction in December. A reading above 50% indicates a service sector economy is generally expanding and below is generally contracting. So you can see here, it's generally been declining. You can see that from this peak here in 2021, it's declined steadily in 2022, and it's kind of been zigzagging a little bit here, really since about November of 2022, up and down and up and down. So we're seeing a little bit of contraction there, or a little bit of up and down, growth, contraction, growth, contraction. The next report is the hospital PMI for the Purchasing Managers Index. And this again is from the Institute for Supply Management. And it says economic activity in the hospital subsector grew in June after 1 month of contraction, preceded by 35 consecutive months of growth, say the nation's hospital supply executives in the latest hospital ISM report on business. The hospital PMI registered 51.5% in June, a 2.4 percentage point increase from the May reading of 49.1%. The business activity index increased compared to May. So you can see that It was below that 50 percentile last month and popped up in June just over that 50th percentile. And so you can see this index has been kind of zigzagging or yo-yoing a little bit, as I like to think of it. It's kind of up and down, just some inconsistencies here. So what does that mean? Well, I don't really know. It's hard to determine, but what we can tell, I think, from this is that there's uncertainty in the purchasing managers for hospitals here is really kind of what we're seeing. That's what I take out of this when I look at it. Okay, next, let's take a look at the unemployment rate. So unemployment fell last month. So for May, it was 3.7%. In June, it was 3.6%. So we saw a little drop, which is great to see. And we can see our 10-year trend. If we look at our 10-year trend here, trend line, you can see that outside of the COVID situation that happened, took about 2 years or 18 to 24 months, but maybe 21 months here to kind of get back down under that 4%. But it's been consistently under 4% here for the last several, just over a year now that it's been that way. So nice to see that. And we can see that total unemployment is going up as well. Okay, next on the minds of people is inflation. Inflation. I had unemployed on my mind here. So inflation on our minds. And so we can see that last month inflation rose or increased 3%. So all things considered, it's nice to finally see these numbers shrink. The one point that I've made the last several sessions we've done this, and something for you to be talking about with your franchisees or franchise candidates is that every day things are getting more expensive. That's the reality behind it. And inflation seems to be slowing, which is a good thing. But this 3%, if we expand out to 5 years here, this 3% that's going on this year is up. If we look at last year around this time, 2022, you can see that it was peaking at around 8% or so. So this is 3% over 8% of last year, which was up about, it looks like around 4 or 5% from 2 years ago. So, these things are compounding on top of one another when we start looking at the inflationary increases. So it is still nice to see that this it is trending lower and it's down to 3%. So all of that is good news. And for you to be talking to your prospects, I think what you might want to be reiterating to them is that it is coming down, but as most clients were meeting, you need to run your franchise with, it's all going up. And it's been going up and it's going to continue going up. So buying in now, if they've decided they're going to purchase and they're waiting for something, that they're delaying this for a few months, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, getting in sooner rather than later is going to help them. So just some food for thought to share with them. Okay, next is the University of Michigan publishes the surveys of consumers. And so you can see here this index of consumer sentiment. They've been running this since 1966. And so this, I'm going to zoom in on this chart for us to see. So this is the 50-year index here. And you can see it's showcasing that the lowest number we had all the way that was lower, it looks on this right at or just lower than where we were in around 1979 or 1980. So it's been, 40 some years, 43, 44 years since that happened. The lowest number here was right around the end of last year, November, December 2022. And now you can see we've had just a clear trend upward for the last 6 months or so. So it's nice to see that trend up, and it's the highest number we've seen here in about a year on this report, which is nice to see that the consumer sentiment, we're starting to see that increase, which is a good thing because the general consumer spend still drives the American economy. So it's nice to see that some confidence continuing to build there. Okay. And by the way, if you have prospects or franchisees you're talking to, that you can go in, you can use this as a highlight to share that it appears based off of this information that the consumer sentiment has kind of bottomed out here and we're on the rise. So if they are opening franchise or buying a franchise, to even if they purchased today, this is something that you could be talking about with them to say, well, the trend is showing up, and we think that trend may continue going up. And even if they bought today, still going to be best case scenario for just about any franchise that for them to be open around January of 2024. So we may hopefully see this continue to rise up for overall consumer sentiment. So just something worth noting and sharing to talk about. Okay, so this whole session we're doing today started all orienting around the coronavirus. So this is from the worldometer.info. This is the coronavirus number of new daily cases. The blue line is a 7-day trend. And this is as of yesterday, it shows the number is about 3,600 new cases on average for a 7-day trend. And then we've got the daily deaths for this trend showing that on average about 16 daily deaths right now on this report that they're publishing this. So I just always like to bring this up. I don't know. I believe I had read recently that the national reporting was no longer being required, but it's still interesting and worth noting because the coronavirus is ultimately what spurred this actual session that we're doing today 3 years ago, or just over 3 years ago. Okay. The next chart I really like to look at and talk through here is the new business applications. So this has been a really interesting, worthwhile number. Just to re-emphasize, if you're in franchise sales, franchise marketing, the reality is that new business startups and starting someone going into business for themselves is on the mind of the general person. And what I like to showcase here is that prior to 2020, you can see that the total number of new business startups. So this is from the U.S. Census Bureau business formation statistics. So this aggregates all of the new business startups from every state across the country. It adds them all together and shows a total number of new business formations that started on a month-to-month basis. And you can see starting back in 2011, the number was around 200,000 new startups. And then there was just this slow trend upward to 2020. So about 9 years, it just slow upward trend to about 300,000 new business startups per month. And then COVID hit and there was a dip, and then there was this big spike. And then you can see for the most part, almost every month thereafter, there have been over 400,000 new startups every single month. And last month, there were 465,000, almost 466,000 new business startups. It's remarkable to think of that. So are all of these people buying franchises? Certainly not. But the point I want to emphasize to you, if you're in franchise sales, franchise marketing, you're talking to these prospects, you cannot assume that they are not seriously considering franchising. It's the opposite. You must assume that they are seriously considering starting a new business. Just the trends are showing that the number of new businesses, startups, is still the highest it's ever been. And so I think that's important for you to note, and not just a little bit higher. We're talking significant increase. If we were to look at this number where we were this month, it is literally a 50% increase over pre COVID numbers. I mean, it's incredible to see that. So I just think it's important for you to note and recognize how, to me, I think significant this is for the mindset of the potential franchise buyer or someone looking to get into business. Okay. Next, what I like to show here, this is the Small Business Index quarterly report. This is presented by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and MetLife. They do these quarterly small business index reports, and Q2 just was released, and the Q2 small business index showed 63.1. And so I just like to showcase where this was. So in quarter one of 2020, it shows, you can see here, it shows 71.7. For that quarter was the reading, and then the big drop from COVID, and then just this slow, slow climb out of it. Our highest reading was Q2 of last year. That was 66.8 was the reading, and then it declined a little bit. And this is our first notch up for since the last 3 quarters. So in a year, this is our first notch up in the sentiment report here. And it's been fairly steady around this low to mid 60th percentile since Q4 of 2021. So to me, that's overall a fairly positive standpoint, is that it's just been stable. I like seeing the stabilization here. Certainly would like to see that creeping up a little bit faster than what it has been, but I think that for overall sentiment here has been stabilized. So I see we may have a couple franchise brokers on the line with us. One thing I would suggest, if you're a franchise broker or if you're a franchisor where you can sell multi-units, if you sold a franchise to someone back in 2021 or in 2020, now might be that time to go back to that person and say, hey, by the way, how are things going? Would you be interested in buying another franchise? Because the sentiment, this existing small business sentiment index score indicates that it's been relatively stable, and relatively stable for one of your franchisees has maybe been in the middle, mid to high performer, someone that's right in the middle to up. Might be the time that they might just say, you know what, I'm ready for another territory right now. Or I'd like to start that conversation to make a purchase and open in early to mid 2024. So just some things for you to be thinking about or game planning, or if you're the franchise broker that sold a recent candidate, now might be that time to approach a candidate from 2 or 3 years ago to see if they're ready for the next franchise purchase. So just some food for thought for you there. Okay, the next thing that I'd like to go over is through Franchise Insights. So Franchise Insights produces a bunch of just great data every month. Every week, they're coming out with something great. And this is their Small Business Startup Sentiment Index. This was released in July of 2023, just a few weeks ago. And here are the highlights that they pulled out. The headline here reads, entrepreneurs increasingly optimistic about startup conditions this fall. 59% of survey respondents are more likely to launch their startups than 3 months ago. And 82.1% see conditions for startup the same or better in 3 months. So what I like about what these headlines show is very similar sentiment to what we saw with the Small Business Index score from MetLife and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So again, they're looking nationally at this, and then the same thing for Small Business Startup Sentiment Index. So again, I think this re-emphasizes that idea that people that are thinking about starting their own business, they're increasingly optimistic about where we're heading into in the fall. And again, I think is an opportunity ripe for you to go to existing franchisees, or if you're a broker, franchisees you've sold over the last 2 or 3 years, go back to them to say, have you thought about that? Or, and it could be franchisees from 4 or 5 years ago, but if they're in the mid to high performer in your network, might be the time to consider just asking, just letting them know before the end of the year, would you like to secure another territory? Would you be interested? Let's set up a call to discuss your options, or let's discuss available territory in or around your area. It's worth noting. So I think that's an interesting point. Let's take a look at a couple other key highlights that I'd like to go over. So, okay. This one I always like to show. What is the question is, um, let me see here. Where's the question? They get asked, what is the access to funding remains a primary question. So this is the access to funding. So they ask them, what's your biggest factor in determining if you're going to start a business right now? What's your number one concern? And the number one concern, and it has been for a while here, is funding. So you can see all of the other conditions, all of the other everything, any other option, access to funding or credit is number one by far. It's head and shoulders above everyone else. Almost 66%, so roughly 2/3 of all people thinking about buying a franchise or starting a business are thinking. 2/3 of them are thinking access to credit or funding is my number one concern. So if you're in franchise sales, franchise marketing, you need to be addressing that. There are a lot of great franchise lenders out there. Reach out to them. An idea I share often is if you're in a system and there's been a franchisee that signed up recently that got a loan, reach out to that franchisee's bank. Ask the franchisee, which bank did they use for that loan? And then reach out to that banker and ask that banker, would you be interested if we sent you would you be interested in funding more franchisees in our system? Chances are they're probably going to say yes because they recently funded one. So it's a great opportunity to get a good connection, and that can start helping make that pathway or access to credit much easier for your franchise candidates that are coming through. The second highest category here is economic climate. That was at 33%, said that was a concern. And what I find interesting is last month it was almost 50% said economic climate. And look at that drastic fall off. So it was a real big spike last month after what we had seen 6 months or so of a decline. We saw a big spike last month, and now things are down. One of the lowest it's been of the year. So at 33.3%, that's the second highest. And then we have everything else. You have stock market, political changes, regulatory changes, tax law changes, and our third highest category is 18.8%, which is just other. So about 20% just have some other concern. So just worth noting for you that people are selecting this. And if I understand correctly on this question, respondents are able to multi-select what they would like. They're able to choose more than one option on this. So I think that's worth noting as well. So I cannot emphasize enough, if you're in franchise sales, franchise marketers out there, if you're in this, how are you marketing to broadcast what you as a franchisor offer to your franchisees? What do you offer to them in terms of funding or helping make that pathway easy? So you might even want to include that you have funding referrals or that they can reach out to help see if they would pre-qualify or get qualified for funding. Okay. Let's see. The next one here is what is a breakdown here? So 56.4% of people looking to start a business are employed full-time. 8.5% are employed part-time. 23.1% are freelance or consulting. 12% are business owners. And active military, I don't see active military on this list right now. It looks like it's at 0 or a very, very low number that's not readable. So again, we talked about those existing business owners. That's 12% that are thinking about starting a business right now. So if you sold 12% of your franchise system might be interested in adding another franchise into their network, or a franchise broker, if you sold 10 franchises over the last 2 or 3 years, chances are one of them is interested in buying another franchise. So sometimes going to the same fishing holes that you've been in before might be a good opportunity for you, in addition to chasing those new leads that are new opportunities that are coming through. Okay, so candidate people, the age of people buying into franchises right now. So Gen Z is representing about 3% of franchise buyers. So just entering into the buyer domain, we see Gen Z. We have 31.6% are millennials. So you're seeing that's the second largest share of new business potentials. Gen X is number one at 49.6%. So about half of all new startup or aspiring business owners are Gen Xers. And then baby boomers are at 14.5%, and the silent generation, I believe, I can't read the number, but I believe it's less than 1% there on that number. So all things worth noting. So just some data and trends there. Okay. The next report here that, real quick, back just to the demographic, just worth noting, 80% of your buyers are either Gen X or millennials. So when you think about targeted messaging, half of your candidates are going to be Gen Xers, 1965 to 1980, and then millennials, 1981. These are people that were born between 81 and 96, according to the survey. So just keep that in mind if you need to adjust messaging content that may resonate with some generational characteristics. Okay. Here's a report through franchiseinsights.com. This was released July 19th. This just came out. It's called Franchise Prospects Affirm Key Strengths for Successful Ownership. And so the article by Michael Alston for Franchise Insights says, majority of franchise inquirers profess having two of the most important characteristics for succeeding at franchise ownership, according to the June 2023 Startup Sentiment Survey by Franchise Insights. Willingness to follow a proven system was reported by 60.7% of respondents, followed by the selection of grit, persistence towards a goal despite obstacles at 53%. So that's all I'm going to read out of the article here, but I'm going to zoom in on this image here, because it gives a really nice overview to showcase what this looks like. So these are self-reported strengths for franchise ownership. So the people coming in, I don't know if they're going to follow the proven system, but they say that they're going to, which is the right place to be if they're thinking about buying a franchise. So know that having an assumption that your franchise candidates, the majority of them, almost 61% of them, are assuming that they are willing to follow a proven system is excellent. You may even just want to point that out to them. By the way, when you buy a franchise, if you don't do this, I always like to encourage our clients and franchise sellers to make sure that they need to communicate to the candidate. You are buying a system. You need to be willing to follow that system, and you're going to be running your own business. You need to work hard. You're going to have grit. You're going to have to overcome obstacles and persevere in order to make this work. So just things worth noting there. Okay. Next article I found interesting that Franchise Insights published. The article heading says, coming Apple feature may help overcome silence unknown callers, barrier to initial prospect contact. So this was released July 26th, 2023, just a couple days ago. And this was written by Michael Alston for Franchise Insights. And it says, Apple announced a new live voicemail feature for its anticipated September iOS 17 iPhone software update. Rather than banishing the caller directly to voicemail without ringing, as the silence unknown callers feature does, first several seconds, the caller's message is presented in text on the home screen, giving the call recipient an option to pick up the call. And so I think this is significant because I'm anyone in sales making phone calls. I'm sure you've noticed that it's hard to get people on the phone just in general, and this silence unknown callers is one of those big reasons why, in my opinion. And so this feature very well may help you get connected over the phone with prospects. So that I think is going to be positive. Okay, and our last Franchise Insights that I like to show is they run a report that shows the franchise categories of businesses that have received the most inquiries over the last 90 days. And this is the categories by percentage. So here are the top 10 categories for highest percentage of leads for franchise inquiries. Home services, number one at 21.5%. Senior and healthcare at 17.3%. Business services at 12.9%. Food and restaurant at 11.2%. Cleaning and maintenance at 10.8%. Those are the top 5 that I just listed, and the only 5 that are at more than 10% of inquiries. Child related is 4.9%, beauty is 3.5%, education 3.1%, pet services 2.9%, real estate 2.8%. So what does this mean? Well, it means if you're in these top 10 categories, if your business is in that, these are the highest categories for you to be aware of, and good for your brand right now at the moment because you're in that list. If you're not in this list, well, this means you probably have a niche category and may have to dig a little deeper to go into some niche or specialized sources to find candidates, or just understand that lead flow may be a little slower for your brand. If you're a franchise broker, what I find interesting is that these home services, that these top 5 categories, these are the categories that your buyers are generally going to be looking into. So just be aware and have plenty of inventory available to discuss or know your top choices to refer to them in those categories. And so that's where we're going to end things today. Oh, one point I did want to say is for the marketers out there, Fran Connect released a really nice article on June 29th, 2023 called Pay-Per-Click Advertising, How Google Ads Can Help You Reach Potential Franchises. And this was written by, just published by Fran Connect in general. It's just a nice article. So if you haven't checked that out, I encourage you to just read that. I thought it was a nice article to share on franchise marketing and lead generation. Or if you're a franchisor, new franchisor, and you're doing this on your own, this is a great way to start to take a look at how pay-per-click advertising is used and understood from franchise sales and marketing. So that's the session here today, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to just open it up. We have a few folks on the line. Anybody, any questions that anyone might like to ask here? Type it into the box or just raise your hand and I'll open up the line to talk here. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any come through. So I'd like to thank you, everyone, for being here. This is our last session of July. Have a great weekend, everyone. Hope you enjoy the sunny skies and keep cool in the hot weather here.